Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is in favor of abolishing the Electoral College. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and this is your right angle on the Supreme Court, its purposes, and its peccadillos that really don't belong in our society at all. Guys, when I saw this quote from Ruth Bader Ginsburg that she's in favor of abolishing the Electoral College, my first thought aloud was, lady, you're in the wrong line of work. You're in the wrong line of work. You don't belong on the Supreme Court. You belong in the legislature. That's where you belong. Scott, can you address, because you're so well versed on the history of this country and the founding of the Constitution, the idea that law would be essentially created, that social policy would be crafted by 5 people instead of the 535 it's supposed to be crafted, would have been anathema to the founders. The thing that shocked me most about reading the Constitution, Scotty, was how little information there is on the Supreme Court. It doesn't specify 9 justices, anything. What do you think about the idea of a Supreme Court justice basically saying, yeah, I think we ought to get rid of the Electoral College?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, Ruth Bader Ginsburg can believe that the earth is flat and that the moon is just a circle of construction paper pasted to the black background of the sky. I don't really care what she thinks until she gets to the bench. And if she uses that kind of thinking as the basis for her court decisions, then I have a problem with her. I really don't care what she thinks in her private life. And as Judge Neil Gorsuch pointed out when he was introduced by President Trump as the nominee for the next Supreme Court opening there, Antonin Scalia's seat, he said, basically, if you're a good judge, some of the cases are going to go against you. You're going to vote in ways that you oppose the outcome of, but because you're a good judge, you've got to follow the law and the Constitution. And so Ginsburg is basically expressing her revulsion for the Constitution. She's saying she doesn't like it. Now, if she carries that into the office with her, then I have a problem with her.
And she does. Continuously. She was the one who talked about writing a new constitution and all the rest of it. Steve, here's a little pyrotechnics for you. The left is already howling about the idea of replacing arch-conservative Scalia with another conservative justice on the Supreme Court. I don't think Ruth's going to go the distance, if you really want to know. I don't think she's going to last 4 years. I don't wish her any harm, but it just doesn't seem likely.
Yeah.
What do you think would happen if the President of the United States were to appoint a conservative or at least a moderate right-winger for that position and really throw the left's ability to socially engineer the country with a majority of 5 into disarray?
I used to have this cat named Dingo. That's actually short for Francisco Domingo Carlos Andres Sebastian D'Anconia for our Ayn Rand fans out there. Dingo was just this big, black, clumsy cat, and he was so slow. One time he was coming through the door behind me, so I just kind of absentmindedly closed the door behind me without looking, assuming the cat was going to keep moving through the door, and I accidentally closed his tail most of the way in the door, and the sound he made was nothing compared to the howls you would hear if Ruth Bader Ginsburg would be replaced by a Gorsuch or heck, even by a Kennedy. The way the math works is if you put a liberal on the court, they are going to vote in lockstep. If you put a conservative on the court, you never know which way they're going to vote because they actually have principles and they're going to follow the law instead of their progressive ideology. That said, we may say some really awful things about Ginsburg, but it's nothing compared to what the left, some on the left anyway, have been saying to her over the last couple of years of Barack Obama's administration, because they were afraid, and it turns out they were right to be afraid, that she might die or retire during a Republican administration, and they were saying things on Twitter like praying for her cancer to return, and why don't you quit, and all the rest. And I think that really shows, really shows the divide that exists in this nation. On the one hand, you've got those who would wish that their own political ally would drop dead in one of the most horrible ways possible, just so they can maintain a slim advantage on the court. And those of us on the right who are hoping to put a constitutional scholar on the court who may or may not agree with us on individual positions, but who is going to uphold what we know is the highest law in this land.
Well, folks, if Ruth Bader Ginsburg or any of the other liberal judges are replaced by either conservatives or center-right moderates, it's not just a defeat for the left. It's not just a court defeat. It's not just a political defeat. It's the end of the game. We have to understand that the progressive policies that they've been presenting to this nation for 40, 50, 60 years now do not pass muster with the American people. They cannot convince more than half of the 320 million Americans in this country that we should listen to their policies. As a matter of fact, they can't convince more than half of the 535 Americans who actually live in a democracy that we should listen to their policies, the 100 senators and the 435 representatives. They can sometimes convince 5 out of 9 people that their policies are worthwhile, and that is how they govern by oligarchy. Replacing a progressive justice with a conservative justice does not mean that conservative policies are put into effect. No. They're laws based on the Constitution. What it means is the lever to engineer society for ideas that people do not want and which do not work would be damaged for quite a long time, and if it's another 2 justices, irrevocably, I think, for the foreseeable future. I'd like to quote the greatest American president who ever took office and say simply, elections have consequences. And the way our government's set up is the way the government's set up. The president may appoint candidates for the Supreme Court, and that person is ratified by the Senate. And if he can get it done, get it done. If we get conservatives on the court, that's because the American people have given the Republican Party the presidency, the House, the Senate. And that is an indication of the wreckage being left behind by Barack Obama. Talked also about in one of our episodes, I think by Steve, on the state houses. So it was you, wasn't it, Scott? On the state.
Oh yeah, that was me.
Yeah. So
good show, by the way.
So there are, in fact, the shadow of Barack Obama is going to hang over the Democratic Party for quite some time, and it couldn't happen to a nicer guy, frankly.
We're a nicer
For
party.
Steve Green, Scott Ott, and the rest of us here at BillWhittle.com, we'd love to thank you very much for watching. A special thanks to our paying members who make this program and all the rest of them possible. If you want to join the fun kids on the block, head over to BillWhittle.com and click on the Become a Member button, and you'll have the time of your life. Thanks. We'll see you next time.